You've heard a lot about electric vehicles. Here's a twist you probably didn't see coming. Georgia, right here in the South, is leading the country in EV manufacturing investment. From the factory floor to your driveway, we'll connect the dots between innovation, industry, and everyday life. Let's get into it. Welcome back to our conversation with Jill Pestana, founder and CEO of Pestana Solutions. If you missed part one of this discussion, I recommend getting back and listening before you continue with this episode. We laid the foundation for what batteries are, how they work, and what the future of battery innovation could look like. Now, back to our conversation with Jill. So, moving on. Our next topic is batteries, basically from science to scale, right? So, trying to take a battery from a patent to the market, right? What does it take something from a patent to like full scale manufacturing in the battery world?
To take a battery from the lab scale to mass production takes three major things. It takes teams, it takes funding, and it takes time, and often a lot more time than we would like it to. A lot of the funding that came into the industry, the timelines for scaling up cell production was like 2 years. Now, a lot of chemistries that are being developed in the lab, it could take a decade to commercialize that at least. And so and then you need smart people who can help along the process, who can learn and develop and research and innovate, not just at coming up with a battery chemistry, a new wonderful box of magic, but that can take that box of magic and figure out how to manufacture it and how to scale it and match it to an application in a way that's cost effective and solves a problem that the current battery technologies can't. So it just takes a lot of time, a lot of funding, a lot of people to make that happen.
Yeah, no, and I guess the related question is that it just takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of really specific expertise. There are all of these really big gaps in innovation and manufacturability. What do you think it's going to take for North America to really catch up to the rest of the world in domestic cell manufacturing? Because we're really trying to do it, and everyone has a take on what it's actually going to take. So I have an answer for this, but I'd love to hear yours first.
I mean, my answer, I love this report that came out actually in 2023. So years ago called the Liebridge Industry Report. And this is when the industry and different government stakeholders came together and were like, how do we build this battery industry in North
Yes.
America? And they
Hmm.
identified 5 key areas. You need resource security, so getting the supply chain together. You need innovation support. You need these catalysts to help these new chemistries or new innovations reach the market. You need to attract investment. You need the dollars to fund all of this. Workforce development, you need to upskill people, you need to train people, bring people in to solve these challenges, and you need public-private partnerships to make sure that this is all being kind of governed or pushed forward along an efficient path. I'd love to hear your take, though. What do you think?
If I had to summarize it, like my take is scale. Like we in the US, there have been all of these individual efforts to try to get at this in a bunch of different ways. And none of the individual efforts are going to have the right kind of scale to do it on their own. But how we get at the best economies of scale and how we get that coordinated, I don't know what the best path for that is. And that is like the one thing that I wrestle with this is that like in my brain I know that the reason why China etc are so competitive is because they've built this really really interwoven ecosystem that is not as simple as lateral relationships. But in our case, we're trying to build these like JVs and like one-off relationships that on their own are not going to be able to compete with like a fully verticalized system that's really just all working together really well. Um, and that's the big thing, is that we need competition. But the one that my friend Mike Oakridge always uses, that we need co-opetition, which is a lot more working together with the competition.
Mike is a wise man.
He is a
Here.
wise man. He really, really is. The last question I have for you in this section is, what do you think is the biggest misconception people have about this industry right now?
Yeah, when I engage with the public on, like I have a TikTok, I feel like a lot of the comments I get and the questions I get are stemming from, like, misconceptions about the battery industry and, like, its impact on the world. So, people think they hear, like, battery fires in the news, or they hear, "What if a mining operation comes into my area, how that's gonna affect it?" All these concerns about the building out of the battery industry, but we have to look at this not in a vacuum, but against what we're currently using for our energy, and see batteries as that stepping stone towards a happy, healthy, clean water, clean air, good jobs, fewer global conflicts in the world kind of future. And we're just at the beginning stages of this industry. We're learning a lot of hard lessons, and this is something that we have to start building the infrastructure. Like, sure, we maybe there's not a large lot of charging stations in your region, but we need to get there so that we have the adoption of more electric vehicles, not maybe all electric vehicles, just more, and that helps with air quality, that helps with diversifying the types of energy, so we're not so reliant on fossil fuels, which is the current picture right now. So it's really this misconception about why are we investing so much into this industry, and how will it benefit you? Well, it's gonna benefit all of us in the way that we're gonna have a healthier world, and China saw this, Europe sees this. If the US doesn't act, we're just gonna fall behind, and we're not gonna have the kind of amazing infrastructure and lifestyle that is like how these other countries are evolving.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing I always explain to people, because we don't get a high volume of news from what's happening around the rest of the world. I feel, based on a lot of the conversations I have, folks who are not like deeply in the industry don't realize how much the competition on the global automotive is picking up. And the big thing I always explain is, I'm like, you should care about batteries and EVs if you care about the US selling American vehicles and about the US automotive industry. Like, if you see the US as the country of the Chevys and the Fords, etc., like, the three big automotive companies in the US that used to be the big three and dominate global automotive sales are struggling globally. And it's competition from China and elsewhere that are really doing it. So a
Yeah,
lot of this is
yeah.
really, in a lot of ways, about the US automotive industry surviving, and also a lot of the other technological advances that the US is trying to do surviving, because all of those things affect the US economy, it affects the value of your dollar, it affects whether you have cutting edge jobs that pay well. There's a huge economic argument and global competition argument as well that I think is not as closely directly in center unless you know about it.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So switching gears again to the next topic, which we're moving beyond the vehicles. So this is also going to be very relevant to folks, right? Because batteries are just popping up everywhere, right? Not just in the vehicles, but also in the data centers, because the data centers need a lot of energy. Also, the charging infrastructure needs a lot of energy, and the batteries help with load management. So we have these stationary batteries called battery energy storage systems. Could you help our audience understand better, like, what is going on with these batteries that they're using in the data centers and like as load management for the charging infrastructure, etc.?
Yeah, so when it comes to stationary storage, this is used, like you said, on the grid, in data centers, and it's basically just batteries that sit there and power something. So they're not moving. That's why we call it stationary energy storage. And what's interesting about these different stationary energy storage applications, like for the grid, powering our grid, or for data centers, is that there's different kinds of energy demands for those. So if you picture a data center, you have a lot of servers that are operating, a lot of hardware operating. You're going to have surges of energy that you need quickly. And so over time, you maybe don't need to pull energy from a battery, you take it from the grid itself. But in short bursts where you can't have a system kicking quick enough, you want to use something like a battery or even perhaps a supercapacitor to quickly give you energy you need to perform that function. Otherwise, I mean, this is my analogy. I don't know if this is actually how it would work, but if I'm using like an AI tool like Copilot or ChatGPT or something like that, and I type in, what's a battery, and I'm expecting a response, if the energy can't be provided quick enough to initiate that operation, it's going to take a lot of time to get my answer. And so
Yes.
that's it on a very simple level. But you can imagine that the types of batteries, like we said, there's trade-offs with different types. So certain types, certain chemistries won't be good for data centers or will be too expensive for data centers, while others would be better for like the grid. So there's a there it's not all the same battery that's a stationary battery.
That makes sense. So, and I think that analogy also makes sense because I don't necessarily think it's just like one person doing it, but guess if like there's just thousands and hundreds of thousands of people and load,
Yes.
definitely. I feel like that probably holds. We can always check that later.
Yeah.
I guess the next question related to that is, are there any other differences between a battery energy storage system that's stationary and the ones in your vehicles besides what you mentioned about it just being stationary?
Yes. So when we say battery, it could actually mean a lot of different things. Like this is a battery, right? You would say this is a battery. Um,
Yes.
you could also call this a cell. It's just one. Well, one package. This I would say this is better accurate. This is a
Yeah,
cell.
exactly.
This has actually 2 cells inside of it.
Inside.
So this is a battery, but it's not a cell. So
Right.
then you talk about a battery of we talked about the battery management system. And then there's other maybe, infrastructure in the battery system to cool it and heat it. So we could talk about the whole battery pack with all of that jazz as the battery. And I think when we're talking about stationary storage systems, you may see like a storage container picture. But inside of that, you may have an HVAC system, you may have a fire suppression system instead of in case something happens. You have a lot of subsystems within that. So when it comes to the stationary energy storage battery that we're picturing the full system, we can't put an HVAC in an electric vehicle.
No.
That you're
No.
having, like, cooling system, like, smaller, compact, more efficient. You may have that for some stationary storage, it's not to say we don't, but those systems are designed very differently 'cause an electric vehicle, at the end of the day, it has to f the battery has to fit in the car, and it has to be lightweight enough for you to drive.
That makes sense. So basically what you're saying is that the big differences between the batteries that are in your phone, your car, and even like an AI data center is less about the battery chemistry being fundamentally different, but in terms of sheer scale, right? Because it's like you might have in your car a battery pack that's just a bunch of cells put together to make that like pouch cell pack situation, right? And then what you're describing for an AI data center is something of like a much bigger scale where the battery that was in your car, it might be hundreds of those in a shipping container sized situation with HVAC keeping it cool and all of that. So it's really a scale issue more than anything else.
Yeah, and even within data centers, the batteries are situated in different places depending on what their use is. There's different actually types of batteries that go into a data center. So some may be more localized to the actual system, some may be in another building supplying some energy. It's all structured a little bit different depending on it. So it's really, the goal of an engineer is to design a system that's efficient and cost effective and get you what you need. Every system's going to look a little different.
True, true. Because in a lot of ways, people are putting in the battery energy storage systems for all of these other reasons besides their primary functions. So the ones that I've seen that are really interesting in the charging infrastructure deployment space is a lot of the private sector actors are getting really creative about how to make their charging infrastructure costs pencil. Because charging infrastructure is expensive, right? So the Costcos and the Walmarts of the world that are putting in these charging infrastructure systems, but also putting in battery energy storage systems, I'm pretty sure are also thinking about this in terms of grid resilience for their own backup storage, backup power, etc. And I think there are probably similar ways that it's being deployed in other places as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just bought a new computer to do video editing, and we had to buy a UPS, an uninterrupted power supply, and that has a battery in it. So if we have a power outage at the house, we have a few hours that the computer can still be powered with that. And that's exactly what you're talking about on a larger scale for like a corporation, a company building where they have the backup power. That's definitely a use. One that I'm learning more about too is when it comes to our grid energy, there's, different times of day that have energy demand, and
Yes.
there's this whole picture of, like, energy trading across different regions of the US, and so these grid batteries are used to also just store or transfer the right energy to the right place in a way. I'm not explaining this as well as, I think somebody in that business would, but that's not really an uninterrupted power supply if the power goes out. It's a general, like, grid functioning, grid resilience mechanism that also, like, lowers the cost for the utility because they're able to use, like, supply energy at the right rates at the right time. It's all like
Yes.
a money thing.
Yes, you're explaining this very well. So basically, what you're talking about is outside of the major utilities that you know and love. So in the South, we have Southern Company and Georgia Power and Mississippi Power and Duke Energy and Constellation, etc., and some EMCs, right? And outside of those major utility groups, you have independent power providers or IPPs. And there are various different types of IPPs. You also have virtual independent power providers. And some of them are using these huge energy storage systems for exactly what you described. You actually did a very good job of explaining it.
Well, thank
So
you.
I,
That
I
means a
can
lot.
verify that was pretty solid. And the big thing is that you have peak energy times and we don't build power capacity and generation capacity for peak energy times because it would just be really expensive and people don't like high utility bills.
Yeah.
So there's a whole secondary market for additional power needs during peak energy supply. The other way that this relates to EVs and electrification is that there are a lot of pilots going on right now about bi-directional charging for utilities to use vehicles as
Yeah.
additional battery energy storage systems to provide additional load management during peak times. So they don't necessarily have to buy from an IPP where they'd usually have to buy it from anyway. So in Georgia, we actually are about to kick off a school bus vehicle to grid bidirectional charging pilot for that reason. And they have some Bluebird school buses that they're using for this and some Heliox slash Siemens equipment that they're going to be testing that on. And Ford recently announced that they were also going to make those pilots available to individual consumers, that instead of doing vehicle to grid, they could do vehicle to home setups where you can use your Ford vehicle as backup power to your home.
That would be amazing. Like, that opens so much more to how our world could be. I once did a quick, like, calculation of what if you had a concert at the LA Forum and you wanted to could you power the concert off all the cars parked in the parking lot if they were all electric vehicles? And if so, what percentage of the car's battery power could you use to power this concert for, say, like 4 hours? And I don't know if my math was right, I did it very quickly, but I think it's you would use maybe about 5% of every car's battery to power the concert for 4 hours, if it was
And
a
that,
certain amount of power draw.
and that would be cool because then you could have a concert literally anywhere without having to truck in all of these generators.
Hello, Coachella!
I mean, yeah, Coachella and Burning Man and all of the random raves, etc., that are in the middle of nowhere. Like, yes. Mm-hmm.
And imagine you get, like, a discounted ticket if you're helping power the concert. Would you do that?
Ooh, I feel like people would.
It could be a
Innovation.
fun
Okay.
exercise, you know, but
At Coachella, new ideas.
yeah, yeah, so, I mean, just this thought experiment, whether it's actually rooted in reality or not, you know, this opens the door to so many cool things when it comes to our energy, and you're right, like, our cars become more than just something to get us from A to B, they could be the things that help stabilize the grid and improve our energy resilience and all these other amazing things.
Yeah, definitely. I have a couple of questions left, and then I want to leave maybe 5 minutes for some audience questions if we have any floating around. So, the next questions are about you. So, you've been a scientist, a management consultant, an educator, and now you're a founder entrepreneur. What connects all of these fancy roles for you?
All these fancy roles, well, thank
Yes,
you.
you should see
Um
yourself as fancy, Jill. You are fancy.
Well, I've always been very driven by my own curiosity and really finding where my strengths are and where I wanna make an impact. That's really what drove me. So, in the beginning, I was, like, fascinated by physics is what I studied in undergrad. I found a passion for material science. I realized I really want to help solve problems with energy, clean energy, sustainability, and that drew me to batteries. And from there, it's like I was developing battery tech, you know, got some patents, got to work in a lab for a long time, which is a lot of fun and also really difficult to fail a lot and not fail a little bit. Taught me a bit of resilience. And from there, I started my YouTube channel across the nanoverse. And I I love working in a lab, but I really also like talking to people and engaging with people. And it's that side of communication that I felt like was a huge strength of mine, and I only discovered that when I was doing the YouTube channel and realizing, "Oh, people actually like it when I talk about batteries like a beauty influencer talks about their skincare routine." So, um, so with that, I really honed in on my strengths in communication as a consultant. And then Pestana Solutions, I founded it just over a year ago now to help companies communicate their innovation to help commercialize it, you know, help innovate and overcome those barriers in the market. I see really cool technology developed by really smart teams, and I want to help them get that out in the world and succeed. And then I also am working on courses, educational resources, of course, because I'm really passionate about making sure that people have access to education. Because I've had my own challenges, even in my career, with having opportunities to pursue my goal of becoming a battery scientist.
No, definitely. Related to that, what advice would you give to students or young professionals about entering the battery industry?
Yes, it's a tough market right now. It's tough, but I think the thing to really hone in on is that batteries are everywhere. Right? No matter what company in the world, like when I was working at Accenture leading their North American battery consulting team, I was talking not just with battery companies, but with automotive companies, utilities, even semiconductor companies. Every company is developing or deploying battery technology in some way. And so when you're thinking about how you get into the battery industry, if you're not finding roles that best align with you and you still want to learn about batteries, just keep an open mind on what opportunities are out there. And also, I would recommend getting involved in an organization like I'm the director of research and programming for NatBat International, which is the leading trade association, and there's committees there on different topics about batteries that anyone and everyone can join. And so you don't have to be an expert to be in the room or join in these conversations. And another organization that has great accessible ways to start learning is the Volta Foundation. So getting to know people, figuring out what problems you want to solve in the industry where you can align your strengths, that's what you should focus on. There's so
Yeah.
much to do.
There's so much that you could do. That's
So
great
much.
advice. Um, I have a couple more questions, but I think I'll ask this one. When you think about the future of the battery belt, what gives you the most optimism? What are you most excited about?
I'm really excited that the states are supporting this so much. They see the need for economic development, for job creation, for supporting industry in the region. And that gives me hope because unfortunately we lost a lot of the federal level support for these kinds of things. So I'm really optimistic that in that region you have Georgia supporting, like I'm working with people in Alabama too. You're getting a lot of state supported initiatives, and that's creating a lot of opportunities for people.
Definitely. And then the last question for now, which is if you could leave listeners with one big takeaway about the role of batteries in our lives, what would it be?
Batteries are so freaking cool.
I like that one.
I don't know. I would say, be kind to your batteries, and they'll lead you in places your curiosity maybe hasn't taken you before. They're embedded in everything. Uh, learn more. Learn more.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's good. I think that's great. Do we have any questions from the audience? Can you see any?
Yes, we have a question, which is which company is a leader in the battery industry right now? This is a big question because as we talked about, there's so many different types of batteries. And so really so many companies are taking leadership over certain types of technologies. But in general, the biggest battery company in the world is CATL, and they're based in China. And we also have BYD in China. Tesla in the US has done a lot. So there's these different big battery companies, Panasonic, LG Chem, a lot in Korea and Japan, like I just said, those examples. So lots of leaders in the battery world, but those are definitely ones to keep your eyes on.
Definitely.
Yeah. Would you have anything to add to that as far as the
The
leader?
o I think CATL, the CATL folks is right because so many people, even if, they're not buying CATL batteries, they do CATL licensed batteries essentially in EVs, right? And BYD I've always found super fascinating because they're an EV company that started as a battery company. So they started as a battery manufacturer back in the 90s, and are now the fastest growing in terms of automotive sales globally, like of any car, even though mostly what they sell is EVs. They're fifth in the world last year in automotive sales, pure automotive sales globally, above Ford and Stellantis. It was drama in the life. Oh, or I think it's actually Ford and GM. I think Stellantis was still third last year. I'm waiting to see where BYD ends up in terms of global
Yeah.
rankings for sales this year. I'm like fully just on the edge of my seat to find out.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, where will they be this year?
I love that. Yes, it's something to really pay attention to because it changes so quickly. Like, I feel like you the analysts 5 years ago could not have predicted where things are now. Like,
Oh, no,
no.
completely upended. It just looks a lot different. Like Toyota was number one, has been number one for the past couple decades, But before that, it was GM for almost 100 years. I think it was like 77 years that it
Wow.
was GM was the top globally in terms of automotive sales. And
Wow.
then Toyota during the 2008 crisis ended up being on top, and they've just kind of sat there, fully
Wow.
just sat at the top of
Yeah.
the leaderboard.
Wow. Wow. And we do have another question here, which this one is making me think. It's which element will be used for batteries at the future? So if we're thinking about maybe what elements are used now, what materials are inside of batteries now, there's so many different ones. Copper, aluminum, nickel, cobalt, manganese, lithium, graphite, that's carbon. So that's just for one chemistry of lithium ion batteries. But if we're looking at the future, we're trying to actually reduce the amount of critical minerals in batteries. So cobalt and nickel, that's why there's this shift towards, like, sodium ion batteries or towards, lithium iron phosphate batteries. So, as far as, like, used in the future, we may shift into more heavy on, like I said, lithium iron phosphate, more heavy on materials that, there's, like, alternative to copper foil in batteries, perhaps. So, the ones that are most expensive inside of batteries, maybe what's in the future.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because at some point we'll find a way for them to be cheaper. Even though they're rare in the world, lithium is also technically relatively rare, and they found out a way to make it cheaper.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of lithium in the Earth's crust. It's just in certain regions of the world, it's more concentrated and more cost effective to mine or to extract. I would say extraction is a better word than mining for lithium.
Oh, yes, definitely. Definitely. Any other random questions from the folks?
Those are our questions that we got. So thank you so
Okay.
much for those who did ask, and feel free, to comment on these videos. The one on YouTube's going to be here, so we can definitely reply to any messages.
Definitely. And I just want to say, Jill, thank you so much for joining us. This has been such a fun and incredibly insightful deep dive into the science, scale, future of battery innovation, and a reminder why the battery belt matters so much to the region and even nationally.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on this podcast, Gabby. This was such a pleasure to chat with you today.